Hello, I'm Anna Schecter, updating breaking news from overseas in Germany. The man suspected of driving a vehicle into a crowd this weekend during Berlin's Pride Parade killed one person, injured dozens other. Police apprehended him, shot and killed him just hours ago. Now, I spoke with a police official in Berlin who told me that the suspect ran towards them with a knife and they opened fire in response. They tried to resuscitate him, but he died at the scene. Yes, the fire department there, despite immediate resuscitation, they were not able to revive him. So here we've got the German chancellor speaking earlier today saying we have to remember our liberal values and lean into them. And joining me now is correspondent Imtiaz Tayeb from London. So Imtiaz, what have authorities said so far?
Look, there's a lot going on here, Anna. It is a very complex situation, but I think we can say with some clarity that the suspect has been killed. We understand that he was found in what's being described as an allotment. For those who don't know what an allotment is, it is essentially a small gardening area that people will tend to. We understand that it is in Spandau, which is in the west of Berlin. Police are gathering in the area, and they have also confirmed that they are not looking for any other suspect. Now, this case has now been handed over to Germany's Murder Commission authorities, but it really just underscores the reality that this is one of a series of similar car ramming attacks. Now, the motivation of these attacks have always been somewhat different, but it speaks to this greater issue which many perceive here in Germany, which is that the government is not doing enough to protect them, that the government is not doing enough to keep people safe. And this case is yet another example of that as more details emerge about the alleged suspect. Anna.
Thank you so much, Imtiaz. Joining us now on the phone is terrorism expert Colin Clark. He is executive director of the Sufan Center. So, Colin, tell me, how did this guy slip through the cracks? He was known to German authorities dating back to 2019. In fact, just in 3.5 weeks ago, July 3rd, police visited him because they were worried that he might be violating the Weapons Act. They didn't find anything, so he was out. But also, just to remind you, he was convicted for trying to plan a terror attack. What happened here, Colin?
Yeah, this is clearly the case of an individual who has slipped through the cracks. Amazing as it seems, because there's also reporting that he had attempted to travel to join ISIS in Iraq and Syria at some point. And we call those individuals frustrated foreign fighters. So individuals that attempt to leave their country in the West to join the Islamic State and are prevented from doing so by authorities. These are extremely high-risk individuals because they're determined.
That's right. He was actually arrested in Lebanon and then sent back to Germany because he's a German citizen. But he had this conviction. In fact, he was sentenced to 1 year and 10 months, and he was part of a de-radicalization counseling group. Can you tell me about that? What is that in Germany, and what went wrong there?
Well, we don't know the details of what the de-radicalization program looked like. Depending on the country, depending on the city or the municipality, they could all look different. Some of them are, have been heavily criticized for being too soft. Some have been widely mocked for having jihadists, taking art classes to paint about their feelings. Look, this is just a painful reminder in the West that the Islamic State poses an enduring threat. They're constantly attempting to radicalize homegrown violent extremists with their propaganda, and they're successful from time to time. And this is sadly just another case of that. But the Germans should have been on top of this, German law enforcement and intelligence agencies. It could indicate that they have a lot of suspects on their list that they're looking after, and they don't have the manpower to surveil and, provide oversight on all these individuals.
And just drilling down a little bit on the de-radicalization programming. So how common is that? How many countries have that? And is there any data on success rates?
No, I mean, the data, again, I'd love to do a study on that, but countries guard this pretty closely. Some of it's done by nation states, some of it's done by civil society organizations. There's no uniform and comprehensive approach to doing this, unfortunately. And because we're unsure of the recidivism rates, it's hard to actually assess these comprehensively and accurately.
So tell me about Germany and looking back over the last decade or two even, how many attacks like this? I know we've had 3 in the last couple of years, but give me a sense of the picture in Germany when it comes to attacks just like this.
Yeah, Germany's, taken in, this was a German citizen, but there's been a number of attacks from Afghan and Syrian migrants that have moved to Germany. Germany's got a very active jihadist scene, there's no question about it. And vehicular terrorism in particular is something that has plagued London, Berlin at the Christmas market with Anas Amri, Paris, New York City, Stockholm. We've seen this from across the board. This is an easy and simple way for radicalized individuals to conduct attacks because cars are everywhere, right? There's no prohibition against it. So it's finding a soft target and then taking action.
Thank you so much, Colin Clark, for joining us. And now we have Anna Schecter, who is a reporter for CBS News there in Berlin on the scene. Anna, thank you for joining us. Tell me, what is it like there now, just hours after the suspect was shot and killed by police?
Hi. So the situation really is Berlin, the city that actually represents freedom and democracy, and actually also safety, feels pretty shocked that this actually happened last night. And we had a number of attacks in the last decade. So people, I think they do have this sense of, how to say, it's always in the back of their minds at big events. And the people who I spoke to, they say especially the gay community, they do not feel safe, and they have this in the back of their minds that all big events carry a certain threat. And this was to everyone I spoke to today. They did say this is something that's always there when they attend big events, and especially pride events. And the city overall is shocked. The response is massive from politicians and from activists and from the gay community, especially, and LGBTQ plus community in Germany. That this actually, that the attacker managed to carry out this attack, even though actually security is heightened in Germany ever since actually really the 2016 Christmas market attacks.
Yeah, we're seeing images there from Berlin and the community there. It's just, I think you brought up such a great point that Berlin, it's such a hub for artists, for freedom of expression, and to have the Pride Parade specifically targeted. I know there have been other kind of Western symbols that have been targeted, like Christmas markets and the like, and this is not the first time where the perpetrator slipped through the cracks. So is there a call for German security officials to step up their game here?
So I would like to compare the car ramming attacks and stabbing attacks to gun violence in America. The car ramming attacks and stabbing attacks are actually just as common as gun violence in America. We just don't have the access, or, well, guns are not widely used and accessible in the country. So this is really something that became also part of our reality here in Germany, that the threat of terror attacks and attacks like that, especially car ramming and stabbing attacks, is always there. But the question really is, there is no reckoning. There were talks about implementing CCTV at big events, and every time and time again, we have these conversations in Germany that maybe only at big events it would make sense to implement and to have CCTV in place. But what you have to keep in mind is the really, really strict data protection laws in Germany, which actually date back to Stasi times. So when it comes to surveillance, if it's in public space, or also the surveillance of potential extremists and people who could potentially carry out attacks, like in this case, it's very, very hard to implement. And on all sides of the political spectrum in Germany, people are actually very critical of surveillance. So even when we speak about tightening security and making public spaces and public events and events like that safer, there's always the question, how are we going to do this without actually making people feel uncomfortable because there will be CCTV and all different kinds of surveillance. So that's a big question, and I think the debate will only start again now.
Yeah, and we have the same thing here with the debate between freedom and liberty and security, and it's a balancing act. But you bring up a good point that it's not just the security apparatus, but it's also the criminal justice system, because this individual was convicted for essentially plotting a terror attack, and there was a sentence given of 1 year and 10 months. But it sounds like that didn't take hold. There were opportunities to challenge that, and so this person was in limbo and out and about. And one thing that just struck me, we were messaging about this earlier, I saw that police were at his home 3.5 weeks ago on suspicion that he had violated the Weapons Act, weapons laws in Germany, and they only found toy guns, and so they couldn't do anything, and they left. Is that part of the conversation amongst officials and members of the community as they're talking about this issue?
Yes, exactly. And also keeping people or suspects in custody is only allowed up to a certain time. And here, I cannot tell you exactly. We're still trying to figure out and confirm what was the issue there, because he was charged in the juvenile court because some of his crimes date back to the time when he was still under 18. So this was the issue there, that they could not enforce the charge against him. So I think it's different in America. Here you can.
But let me stop you there, because he was over 18 when he posted the ISIS propaganda. That was back in 2024. He would have been over 18, and then when he traveled to Lebanon, he was over 18. So there's something there where he had prior convictions from dating back to when he was just 13 or 14 years old, actually. The first time he had a conviction was in 2019 for an assault on the schoolyard. And yet, for some reason, there was a carryover where he was still being held accountable as a juvenile, even though some of what he was doing when he was over the age of 18. So something to drill down on with sources there, Anna.
Yes, exactly. This is what we will have to establish now while we are investigating this whole case, because in the past, especially younger suspects who carried out similar attacks were treated also by the juvenile court. So it has to do with the crimes that he committed before reaching the age of 18.
And last question, just how are people feeling? Do they feel safe walking around in Berlin and elsewhere in Germany given this attack?
So the people I spoke to today, of course, were shocked and were scared, because the whole city felt affected by yet another attack, especially at a time where people are celebrating diversity and freedom. But overall, the sense of security in Germany, I would say, is rather good and rather strong, and there's still trust in the authorities.
Anna, thank you for being there in Berlin to report this story.